Welcome back. We're now going to structure our paper. We're now going to look at the structure of papers, and our most important guideline there is don't explain. Don't ever explain, or at least avoid at all costs that your reader believes that you are explaining to them. You will not be able to always avoid explaining really, because of course you're talking about things which are new. Of course you're talking about things which are difficult maybe. So there will be some explanation going on, but make sure it's always behind the scenes. Make sure that your reader doesn't really notice that you're explaining to them. Why? Because people hate explanations when it's not in the classroom, when it's not maybe in a video like this. They hate explanations. It's actually understandable from our metaphor about the classical style, because when I'm explaining, I'm no longer at the same level as you. I'm putting myself above you. I know things which you don't know. And even implicitly that may mean that I feel I'm better than you. So avoid that. And there are tricks to avoid them. There's simple tricks at the level of individual sentences. So one trick I always routinely apply when I write about something. You cannot maybe sometimes avoid some jargon, for instance, because there is some concept which is central to what you're writing about, and you come back to it again and again and again, so it's better to use that word. So you want to introduce that word, blah, blah. So what you can do then is say, well, this is blah, blah, and then give an explanation of that term. This is blah, blah, a very complicated way of doing. Okay, so then you're explaining. And the reader feels you are explaining. If the reader doesn't know the word blah, blah, they feel you're explaining. If he does know the word blah, blah, it's even more annoying. They say, this is blah, blah, then you give the explanation. The reader thinks, I already know. Whereas if you just do it the other way around, so you say, this is a very difficult way of doing, we call that blah, blah. So you give exactly the same information, but it feels much less as an explanation. It feels much less as an explanation. It's a kind of afterthought. If you already know the term, okay, you first hear this long explanation, well, the definition, and you think, okay, I know that's this, and you hear it, it's confirmed. If you don't know that term, you just pick it up like that, and then it gets used later on. So it's not true that you don't explain, but you explain in a less explicit way. That's what I think is important. So it's important to grab the reader and grab them by things which they find interesting, like themselves. People are always interested in anything which touches their own lives, which touches their own body, which touches their own situation they are in, which touches themselves. So whenever you can find an angle which has something to do with themselves, take that. Or at least take something about people. So if it's not about themselves, then let it be at least about other people, how other people live, how other people do things, how other people experience things. And even, I'm going to show you, even very abstract mathematical, physical topics probably can be introduced by talking about, if not about the reader themselves, then at least about people, about other people. But the best of all, so whenever you can find that angle, choose that, because it's basically guaranteed to be successful, to grab almost any reader. The one thing which everybody in the whole world is always interested in is, of course, babies. So whenever you can find an angle with babies, how they grow, how their life is structured, how they, what they need, this is something which, well, people have had babies, they want maybe at some point to have babies, they have children which have grown up, or they have everybody likes babies. And so babies are a good, in my experience, the best angle ever. If you don't find babies, at least find human beings. And the best way, I believe, therefore, to structure your first popular science papers is by focusing on people. There are many other ways. I think they're more advanced. So your first pieces should be stories, because stories are always about people. Choose some angle where you're talking about somebody. Choose some point of view. When you're writing about this abstract mathematical or physical topic, choose as the point of view, for instance, the researcher or the team of researchers who have been working on that. How they spent their nights in the office struggling, how they couldn't sleep for weeks being nervous because they couldn't find the right solution. Within that story, you can basically put a lot of stuff about the material, the actual problem they were worried about, but you have this story to grab the reader's attention. Take that. So take some story or take some other point of view. Take the point of view of, in the case of a story about medicine, take the point of view of a patient who is anxiously waiting for a new medicine to be developed. In the case of babies, take the point of view of the mother who is worrying about something maybe going wrong in the development of the baby. Take some point of view of some human being explicitly. Make that the official focus of your story, because the word story, I think, is very important here. Again, there are many different ways of structuring papers, but I would say for beginners, a very, very, very good technique is using the technique of storytelling. Include a lot of dialogue in your story, in your article. Include a lot of dialogue. So make people speak. It can just be a written version of the interview you had with some researcher. That makes it, I don't even know why, but that makes it much more lively. So really, so I wonder what's good. No, I don't know. I'm doing a little bit of dialogue here, right? So I'm talking to myself. So and that, hopefully that makes it more lively. Or any other kind of story structure. So try to build your paper as much as a story as you can. Tell a story. Try to think of your topic as a story. And I assure you that can be done for basically anything. So medical stories can be told also from the perspective of some village in Africa where everybody is dying for some disease, and then take some individual person and try to tell the story from that point of view. And the final technique to refine your story even more is what's called Chekhov's gun. Chekhov was a famous 19th century Russian playwright. So he wrote many plays, and he observed that what the audience expects in a play is that when they see a gun in the first act, so there's a gun hanging there on the wall, then something should happen with that gun during the play. Actually, he said in the last act. So in the last act, the gun should shoot. Because people see the gun and then they're waiting basically all the time for something happening to that gun. And when then actually something happens, that gives some kind of sense of fulfillment to the audience. It makes you feel better. Do that in your paper too. It doesn't have to be a gun, but when you have so you start your article with some kind of anecdote, make sure that towards the end of the article, the last paragraphs of the article, you're going back to that anecdote. It's amazing how satisfying that feeling is for reading an article like that. It's an easy trick. It's maybe a cheap trick, but it's almost guaranteed to work. It gives a very professional flavor to your paper. So that is going to be your assignment now. Again, look for 2 new science communication papers in newspapers, in magazines, on blogs. 2 new ones. Again, they should be like 500, 600 words each, maybe longer, not shorter. And in this case, compare them in terms of teaching. How do each of them avoid teaching, and which of the 2 is most successful? Write about 200, 300 words about that particular topic. And I see you next week.